Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for watching. My name is Desiree Ohrbeck, and I am a former lecturer at the University of Washington Scandinavian Studies Department. National Danish Book Club stands on two different legs. We have a book club hosted by Nete Schmidt and a literary event series hosted by me. If you want to watch previous interviews or conversations about Danish writers in English translation, please go to northwestdanish.org. Do you enjoy Danish sarcasm, irony, and humor, or does it make you feel uncomfortable and awkward? Either way, I'm sure there will be something for you in this upcoming conversation. Do you recognize the feeling of finding it hard to navigate in life, within your language, or in the surroundings you live in? Are you interested in books that peel back the political correctness and screams out emotions we all secretly have? Then I think you'll enjoy reading Stine Pilgaard's novel. Stine Pilgaard is a graduate of the Danish Writers Academy. Her first novel, My Mother Says, was a critical and commercial success in Denmark that won her the Bodil and Jørgen Munk Christensen Award and a nomination for the prestigious Danish Broadcasting Corporation Literature Prize, which I'm sure would be translated from the Romanpris. The focus for today's conversation is her novel, The Land of Short Sentences, which gained huge popularity when it was published. It won the Weekendavisen Literature Prize and the Danish Booksellers Association's Golden Laurel Awards, so De Gyldne Laurbær. How can you not fall in love with a book where one of the sentences read, "You always tease the ones with the biggest hearts"? I mean, I just love that sentence, and I hope we'll have a chance to talk a little bit about that as well. Is it a wonder, in a world with so many truths, that the narrator, in her search for a new identity as a new mother, having moved from the city to rural Jutland, where social norms and language are unfamiliar, that she experiences primal rage, and that her utter disillusion manifests itself in her inability to pick a name for her infant son. Welcome, Stine.
Thank you.
Is there anything you would like to add to my introduction?
Actually, I was so touched when you read this sentence about "you always tease the one with the biggest heart," because it's a very important sentence for me. So it's funny that you picked it out. It was the sentence my boyfriend told me. Once I had a kind of crisis because I thought, I came with all my bright ideas and I really wanted to create some social networks and parties and trying to be friends with people. And then I felt like everyone was like, ha ha ha, this is so typical Stine. And I was like, oh, why is people always teasing me? And I felt so stupid and lonely. And then he told me like he has a really serious voice. And everything he says sounds very, truth. So he told me, "You always tease us the one with the biggest heart," and that I chose to see this as a kind of advice or truth I would bring with me in life. So I picked it for my book also, and it's in the answer in one of the letterboxes that the main character is editor for.
I love that sentence. It stood out very clearly, and I'm sure that we've all been teased at some point, and so of course you feel like, oh, that's about me as well. But I completely stole that sentence, and I told that to my son, and I just love that sentence. It made me. It's so profound in a way.
Yeah, and it's so simple in the same way.
Yeah.
Because you would never tease a person that made you feel uncomfortable, or maybe you felt afraid of them. If you tease someone for fun, it's always because you like them in somehow. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So before we get into the nitty-gritty details of your book, would you mind summarizing the book that we're talking about, The Land of Short Sentences? Are you able to see it here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So can you tell the readers a little bit about your book?
Yeah, I will try. And actually, this question is one of the questions I really don't like to answer, because I actually don't know so much about my book. And I think it's because I wrote it, so I get so confused when people ask me, what is it about? But I will try. It's about a woman in her early 30s who is moving to a little village at the west coast, very far out in the country, because her boyfriend has got a job at the local boarding school. It's called a højskole. It's a boarding school for young people. So she is like following him and try to create a new life there. And she struggles a lot making friends and having her driver license. Yeah, and then she have this job at the local newspaper. She get responsible for the letterbox, so she have to tell people what they should do in their daily life problems, and suddenly and slowly she settles in her new life. Do you like that summary?
I do. I was talking to someone who's a project manager at one of the libraries in Seattle, and I told her about your book, and she was like, "What's it about?" And I was like, I found myself struggling a little bit, but of course I immediately went into identity and finding your place in life with your new role as a mom, and like how that
it sounds very boring when you have to tell what it's about. It's about a female who's very confused.
Yeah, aren't we all?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I will say to the viewers though that this is the second book or the third I read from you, and both in Danish and English. It's
a very bad sign that you don't remember.
Yeah, well, let's say it's three then. But I mean, I love the language, and I love that like that sarcasm and irony, because it's so recognizable for someone like I've lived in Jutland. I totally recognize the language in it. But before we get to the language part, let me ask you, the title in the Danish version is quite different from the English one. So the Danish title is Meter i sekundet, and of course the English title is the Land of Short Sentences. I kind of see it, like, after having thought about it a little bit, but why did you choose both of the titles, really?
I was not sure which title I would use for my book, and actually in Danish the Land of Short Sentences is called De korte sætningers land. So I was really happy to have another possibility to use one of my other titles. The title meter per second is a kind. I think it refers a lot to the wind power in this little village I write about, and I also lived there while I wrote the book. And I was writing in my kitchen, and outside the window there was this big mill. So while I was writing, I was looking at that mill all the time, and I was so obsessed by the weather to see, how fast would it, turn today. So it meant a lot to me to have this meter per second is what we use when we talk about the wind. I think for me it's also a kind of metaphor for time, and the speed of life, and the time change all the time. We go, from winter to spring to summer to fall. So I know that just, life passes by every second. And the mill was like a clock for me. I was thinking so much about time. So I choose this title for Danish, but I was so in love with this title, the Land of Short Sentences, because I found it very poetic and beautiful, but also a little bit misleading, because it sounds like the book is about a city or an area or a place of nature, and actually it's about a woman and her brain, actually. So I think the title was not that good, but I also liked it, so yeah, I choose it for the English version. Do you like it?
Yeah, I do, because so in America, a lot of readers or people here would associate Scandinavian literature with minimalism.
Yeah,
And when you have that land of short sentences, it ties in, I think, with that view on literature, and maybe that intrigues some people because it's so different from what we're used to here.
Yeah.
So I really like that, but I have two things I have to say. So the Meter i Sekundet also reminds me of, there is a place in the book where you describe that she feels she's like super duper speeding, and she's really not driving in the car. And I remember when I took my driver's license, I was like terrified, and I thought I was going so fast, and the driver teacher, whatever, said, like, you're going 15.
Yeah.
Now you can speed it up a little bit. And it was just like so recognizable. And another thing I want to say about the windmill thing, it was funny, because one of the trivia questions in Trivial Pursuit is, on average, how many days is there no wind in Denmark? And the answer is 10 days. So
really.
So it ties in very well with what you were feeling and experiencing when you wrote your book.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a kind of a weird thing to pop in here, but that's the truth. There is a lot of wind in Denmark.
Yeah, that's true.
So could you maybe talk a little bit about, I find the structure in your book very interesting. It's kind of 3 different structures, or 4 if you take the narrative voice in as well. Like, would you want to say something about the songs or the poems, a letterbox, and like the different frames? And I'm curious also to hear if you chose different frames to also give yourself some creative freedom, because all those structures have kind of their own set of rules when you write. Do you want to say something about that?
Yeah. I always try to make it sound like an artistic choice, but the truth is that I'm really restless when I write. Writers have different ways of doing their job, but I have 25 different documents, and I get a new idea every day, and I say, yeah, this is the idea. It should be only songs, or this should be only letterbox text, or it should be only a whatever songbook. So because my ideas are changing that much, and because I'm always insisting on work in the style I feel this day, then it's just a mess. I mean, I'm actually very bad at writing books because my brain is a mess, and I get I fall in love in ideas all the time, and I forget the old one, and yada yada. Anyways, in the end, I have 200 or 300 pages, and I call my editor. She's a little bit tired sometimes. I say, yeah, now we have to start the work, and then we start the work and look at all the pages, and she's like, yeah, okay, here's a song, here's a letterbox, yeah, okay, driver license, yeah, but then we start to try to how do you say, make it look like a story, at least, to create some kind of timeline. Actually, we do it, in paper and put it up at a wall, and then there's okay, it should be like a year, okay, and then we put the chapters up and try to create some, I don't know, some feeling of that it's actually a story. So it's a lot of the texts are a kind of coincidence. I would wish I had some really interesting, answer, but the truth is that I'm just, for me, writing is about desire and to be curious, and if I stop being curious, then I stop the text. So I have to, what do you say, find the answers in the end. If I start to have a plot or know too much about my character or my text, if I don't feel surprised, it's like the text will like just die. And if it dies for me, it will always also, you know, die for you. So I try to actually to fall in love with the text and the characters. You know, just like a marriage, you have to go on a date sometimes, you know, to keep it like in changing. Yeah.
Yeah. But I do think, though, that you're selling yourself a little short, because all that creative craziness and authenticity, it comes from you, right? So you might need some compositional help or whatever, but
Yeah.
it still is, it comes out of your creative brain.
Yeah, and it's also a choice, you know, to go into a story without knowing it,
Yeah.
because some writers know the story before they start, and yeah, you can also do that. And I'm very jealous of these kind of writers, because it seems so, you know, like impressing, you know, to have this big story in your head. But for me, writing is more like a way of living my life. You know, I write every day, I write diary, but if the day is like very boring, I just start to put in some lies in my diary, you know, and suddenly it's fiction. So I don't really mind about the truth. I just want to make some nice characters, you know, to hang out with, because I have this, you know, huge privilege as a writer, that, you know, some people don't like their boss, or maybe they don't like their office colleagues or whatever. And if I don't like my characters, I can just, you know, delete them and find a new one. And it's really amazing, because I loved hanging around with my friends, the characters in the Land of Short Sentences. So it's full of joy for me to write, and also sadness sometimes if they have a hard time. I feel, I mean, sometimes when I write, I can just start crying. Yeah, sometimes my boyfriend, if I'm writing in the kitchen and he's like, yeah, okay, you're in a sad page now, yeah, okay. So it's not like are you okay? He said, yeah, okay, writing, you know. So it's very emotional for me.
Yeah, but it sounds like for the most part you're having fun with your characters. But I feel like maybe we can also touch on this character later. But Krisa, for instance, in your book, is maybe one of those characters that can make you both feel a lot of love, but also a little sadness. But we can get back to her later on. I wanna talk about the letterbox, because I find it so funny that that your main character, your narrator, really doesn't know where, like, she's trying to find her place in life, and at the same time she gets this job like telling other people what to do in their lives,
which is ironic in somehow. Yeah.
So how much, it stands out, those letterbox replies, they're so hilarious, so funny. How much fun did you have writing those letterbox answers and questions?
Yeah, I don't know, 500%, if I should, you know, say something. But actually, is the letterbox was my first idea to this novel. It was the first text ever in this script, and it was again, it was like, it felt like a coincidence. I just had my first baby, and I had this one of those, you know, pregnancies where you just puke all the time. You know, some people are like, yeah, okay, 12 weeks, it's very hard. And I was like, yeah, 40 weeks. I was just so bitter. So, you know, for so long time, 9 months, I was just, you know, lying there and having a lot of thoughts, but I could not really do anything. So I felt like, you know, just full of a kind of, you know, wisdom, something I wanted to come out with. And then there was this practical thing by having a baby, that I could only go to the library 3 hours per day, because I was breastfeeding him. So I could go like, you know, 3 hours, and these letterbox texts were like, you know, 1 page or something. So it's just, you know, bicycling all the way, and then and then going home. So it had this really funny energy, because there was so much, you know, life, and I was, you know, coming back to life I mean, I gave birth, and that was wonderful, but I was also, you know, able to not puke at anyone again, which was just really lovely. So it was a really happy time for me. Yeah, and I think it's very obvious in the text that I really had so much I wanted to come out with. And the funny thing, I started the text like kind of monologues. I just found a theme, and then, you know, wrote everything I thought about what is wrong with humanity. You know, why is I so much brighter than everyone? You know, and then afterward, I had to find out some people who could ask something to get this answer.
Yeah.
And then I start to feel so sad for them. You know, I tried to imagine, you know, all the people with all the problems, like, oh my God, I hope they will have a good life. And then it was so, you know, they got so, you know, alive for me. So I was like filled up by, you know, so many different people with so many different crises. Actually, in the end, I thought, you know, and somehow that I actually had a letterbox. Yeah. But then I thought, yeah, okay, maybe it's only a novel, but it should be a letterbox novel. And then I had a new idea, you know. Yeah.
And then you had to go with that as well. And then it was
Yeah.
it did fit into the book. But it's so funny, like motherhood is a hard awakening. First, like with the pregnancy, that is very different from what everyone tells you.
Yeah.
And then after, it also sounds like for you, it has been kind of a catharsis moment where you were like, okay, all those thoughts that I have now gathered and I'm in the process of figuring out, I'm gonna get it out in between breastfeeding because I do
Yeah.
have some sort of a little piece of myself left.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. A way to get back to yourself. I think actually I never thought about it, but I think you're right. Yeah, because it was also a way of finding out who am I now, who was I before, who is everyone, you know. I was so confused but also happy and curious. And for me it was just crazy being mom. I don't even know if it was good or bad. It was just, you know, crazy. And it's so funny because I don't know, maybe, you know, 45% of all women are, you know, get babies, so it's not like it's so normal, you know. But I was just like, oh, okay, I got my own person. That's crazy, you know. Yeah, I remember my boyfriend told me when we had him, he was like, oh my God, now we are responsible for his teeth. I don't know why. It was just so weird to be responsible for someone's teeth, you know, because we always forget to brush our own teeth. And now I had to, oh, you have to brush your teeth, you know. So it's just so funny it's a huge responsibility, but it's also like bizarre and somehow, you know.
It is. I remember looking at my kid when I had my first kid, and I looked at her after a week and I was so amazed she was still alive, and I had just put her to my body.
Yeah, because you don't really believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah, when he had his first 1-year-old 1-year birthday, we just had, when he falls asleep, we just have the biggest party, you know, in the garden, and we're like, what are we celebrating? That he's not dead, you know. We did it, we managed. He's alive and he's okay. And yeah, so I think this experience was also really beautiful and meaningful and crazy and funny and bizarre. There was just so many, you know, feelings in that. It's not because I think it's a novel about motherhood, but for me, there was some kind of energy in this thing. And I was also, you know, I got obsessed by nature. You know, I heard people talk about nature before, and I was like, yeah, okay, that's a tree. And yeah, it's the ocean. That's very nice. But suddenly it was really, I felt like, you know, I assume you know about Lion King.
Yeah.
Yeah, the circle of life. And I felt just like, you know, Mufasa, you know, at that mountain. I had this feeling that, oh my God, I'm giving this to my kid. And everything was just more big and more beautiful. And yeah, it was just like, actually, I never took drugs, but I think if I ever took drugs, I think it would be this feeling, you know, everything is so big and important, and I have to write about it just now. And then I'm not even able to tell you what the novel is about.
Yeah,
So.
and you really capture that so well, like both both that high of motherhood and looking at your kid like you love that kid with every ounce of your body, and at the same time, or not at the same time, but like minutes later, you can like want to kill the kid or like blame it for the position you are in life, and that they're holding you back. And also that what you say about, all a Disney movie, all of a sudden different lines from a movie or whatever can feel like so profound, and now you really understand, right?
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about the songs in your book, because I read somewhere and I was like, really? Like Højskolesangbogen.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see it, but Højskolesangbogen, which I have an old sample, is like so prestigious, and the condescension measure for being a well-rounded, educated, super Danish person. Did you have some of these songs in the Højskolesangbogen, or did I get that wrong?
No, I have actually 4 songs in the new book. Yeah.
That is very impressive. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, but it's also a coincidence because I had this period where I used a lot of my time in a train, and there was this, train line for 3 hours where you are just sitting, and I used to work when I go to the train, but the train, like, tuk, 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 and it stops and it starts and stops and starts, people walking around. So it was really hard for me to write fiction, to write stories. And then I started to write songs because it fitted very well to the situation, this rhythm all the time, and you could do this very short words. So it was like a kind of hobby I had in the trains. And then my boyfriend turned 30 years old, and I wanted to give him a birthday gift. So I wrote a kind of love song for him in the train. And then I think the music teacher at the school heard the song, and he used it in the big choir. And then it suddenly, turned out to be a real song. And then the Højskolesangbogen members invited me to send some text, and then I tried to send that. So actually it was really not a plan I had or something, but yeah, I don't know, but it's just happened, and that's really how I try to write, and also how I try to live my life, because I think maybe in all of us, we have a little part of us who really would like to control everything. At least I have this part of me. And I think that it's not a good way of living your life, because you get so, there's so much you don't see, and so many possibilities you never experience. So I really try to be open every day, and it's not easy for me, but I try to say, what will this day try to tell me? If I go to a bus, I try to talk to the person next to me. Is there any story? I don't want to miss it. And I try to meet people. I don't think, this is my son's teacher. I try to think she's also a person. She could be my best friend. She's also a neighbor. She's a sister. She's a mother. She's a customer in the supermarket. I try to see, who we are. To go behind the scene in somehow.
Mm-hmm.
But this is also the reason why I cannot tell you so much about my book, because it's a kind of sum of all these meetings, and all these different coincidences who just creates a life or a book or a person.
It's so interesting though, because I'm wondering if that's why your character comes through like she does in the book, because that is not a very Danish thing to do. Like if I drum up a conversation when I go to Denmark with strangers, like I do that here all the time in America, and I love it. And I, like you say, I love hearing other people's perspectives, because otherwise how would I know how the world works, right? But in Denmark, you are almost viewed, if you do that, as if you have like a mental illness or you're super duper lonely. And that's sort of also how your character comes across, not necessarily if you look at her own perception of herself, but the way the world reacts to her. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I think many people think that I'm weird, but I don't have a problem about that. Because in Denmark we are maybe like a little bit shy in public. Luckily I look very normal. I think if I looked, like very special or something, but I look very normal, so people are not afraid of me. But I know many people think that I'm very direct or ask very maybe intimately question or something. But I think it's very actually important to be close to each other, because we also live in a world where the boundaries are very black and white, and social class and colors and cultures, and there's so many people who tries to tell us that we're different, in politics and in commercials. There's so much who try to split us, the human race. So I think it's really important to try to reach out and find out that we are not that different. That's what I believe. I believe that we are not that different as we think sometimes.
That's interesting, because if I pivot a little bit, so for many of us listening to this interview, many of us have been in a position where we had to reinvent ourselves because we moved to the other side of the globe. So it's a very familiar thing to think about. And so we've gone through maybe language changes and definitely cultural changes. In that sense, I think your book also, touches at least on integration. And for most of the viewers here, we've moved from Denmark and to the US. And so we've experienced those feelings of loneliness and a sense of not belonging and rage and confusion and disillusion. And it's kind of the same thing in your book, that the narrator has to reinvent herself, and at the same time she refuses to change. Could you say something about that?
Yeah, but I think it's very hard to come a new place, because you need life witnesses. I mean, as a person, you are also a product of your own story and your memories, and what you are for other people. And if you're alone, or maybe you have your spouse or something, but you come without your network, so you could be anyone. And I think it creates a kind of loneliness when you meet people and they don't see all your histories. But I also think there is some sparkling and interesting. It's also a new possibility. You could be anyone. I mean, it's both that you could be anyone, but it could also be something good. You could be anyone. So I think it's also a good thing, and it has a kind of energy. For me, when I write, I like this feeling of being a tourist. When you come to a new place, you see many things more clear, because you don't have your habits, and you don't have any routine. You have to start all from the beginning. So I think it also has something really beautiful to start a new place and come with the person you are, and what can you do here. And I think this energy is also a part of the, now I call it a plot, there is no plot, but it's a part of the energy in the novel. How can you use this position, this outsider position? It can be lonely, and it can be tough, it can be sad, but it's also, it's also interesting, and it's also fascinating to settle a new place. So I think that it has two sides.
Yeah, it's so interesting because when we move, we lose our shared experiences.
Yeah, yeah,
And we lose, that other people having lived alongside our lives, but that also sometimes holds us back in some of the ways
exactly. Yeah,
we want to live. And
yeah,
here, but when I say here, I mean for us
yeah,
who have
yeah,
moved to, we can reinvent ourselves, but it also is a lonely experience. But at the same
yeah,
time, like you say, it's a unique opportunity to use those experiences that no one here knows about, and
yeah.
then be the person you want to be without those things holding you back.
Yeah, and when you create memory, the first time you have your neighbors at your house, this will be a memory just now. This will be my memory, and this is first time I went drunk down of that lane or something. I mean, you're so conscious that you create memory, because I think it can be very bad for people just to live automatically, do what you used to do, and it's so easy to go on that boat, and just do what you used to do. So I think actually it's very important sometimes to do something new and challenge yourself. Try to. I have, for example, I have one rule every year. I make a new friend. I want every time when it gets New Year, I think, okay, who is my new friend from this year? It can be a neighbor, some mom from my son's class, or the shopkeeper. It don't have to be my best friend, but it should be a person that I'm really grateful I met and I want to keep in my life. So I think it's a good rule. Yeah, this is a letterbox talking, now. But yeah, I think it's very important to because as grown-ups, sometimes we stop making new friends. We're so busy, and we just want to keep the contact with all our busy childhood friends and high school friends, and sometimes we forget how extremely important it is to make new friends, because they can teach us so much.
And that's another thing I think is different here in America, that people move around so much. It's not
Yeah, okay.
uncommon to move, several states over for a new job. Whereas in Denmark, you have kind of your friends back from school, from
Yeah, that's
grade
normal. Yeah,
school.
yeah,
And that's very different here. So you are used to constantly having to find a way to have friendships that matter, but are maybe not at a super deep and profound level, because we're all social human beings. We need
yeah,
to have some social interaction.
yeah, yeah,
It's very interesting. But I want to go back to what you said a little bit earlier about nature, because it does play a big role in your book. But I also feel like a lot of the words that are used tie more to and places inside. And when I say inside, I kind of feel like words that tie back to the city she comes from. So it would be the hotel or the restaurant or the daycare institution. And so in that sense, her new identity is everything is like mixed together, right? Nature and city and the language that's part of her changing her identity, because the sentences and the pace, the cadence in her new place is so different from where she comes from. Like it's slower, it's shorter. Could you say something about how you thought about that when you were writing, if you did?
Yeah, because I'm really afraid that I actually didn't. Yeah, I would really like to tell you something really interesting, but I was not conscious about that, I have to say.
Okay, but that's fine. But it's as a reader, at least it struck me that nature is there as something you kind of look at, or you are placed in, but it's not incorporated into your language.
Yeah, but that's true. Maybe I don't understand your question, but I try to answer now, because I think you're right that I use the nature as a kind of painting or background picture or something, which is not I mean, it's a little bit stupid to do, you know, but because I know that when I write, I have a lot of dialogue. I have some monologues. It's very the story is a lot about language, you know. And then I was like, while I was writing the book, we were actually, you know, moving to the West Coast, and I was just like, yeah, okay, now I have a room for all my conversations, and I was like, yeah, this could be fun because nature is it's a strong common picture. If I tell you, you know, ocean, I know that this create a picture in your mind, you know, it's very, you know, big and strong, and maybe you have some memory about the ocean. So the word ocean creates some maybe affection for you, and the same as wood, sundown, sunrise, you know, it's a very easy way to create some pictures. Yeah, so maybe I used it some as a kind of trying to I don't have a lot of pictures in my stories. I have a lot of word and conversation and characters. So maybe I thought it could be a nice way to, you know, like a postcard or something, you know, to make it more like, to give it another level or something in the reader's mind. Yeah,
that's interesting too, because this is completely
it's actually a little bit humiliating because it sounds like very, you know, yeah.
But I think, if I may say something here, because when you try and create a picture in your reader's mind, I think it's pretty genius, because we all have our own individual images. Like if I think about forest, it's my experience, and you have a different one, and another reader has a different one. But we are kind of participating readers, and you let us create the images we want, and then you at the same time instill in us what you want to come across with your characters, for instance, right?
Yeah, I use a lot of what you could call empty places, we call it. I like to create the story with the reader. I mean, as an example, I never tell you how a character looks. Maybe I say she has red glasses, but this is the only thing I tell about her. Or maybe she has black hair, but I don't want, you know, for example, Dostoevsky or someone, he can like use 12 pages about a nose, you know, and I love those noses and 12 pages, but it's not my style. I like to put some details out, and then you can like make the picture.
Be the participating
and I don't know
reader.
why, but I just think I like the idea of cooperate with the reader. Yeah, it feels, you know, a little bit like a friendship or something. I don't want to be this, you know, Olympic guard talking to you, you know, from my mountain, and now you should hear my story. It starts now. It's more like I want to start in the middle of everything with you. That's what I personally find beautiful about literature. Yeah,
and it's also a very Scandinavian tradition now, I feel like.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
20 years or so, right?
Yeah, but I also like, for example, American literature. Jonathan Franzen, you know, he has this big stories with you know, lots of people and families, and I find it really, really interesting. But maybe I'm just not able to do it. For me, he's like a real writer, you know. And Stoner, the book Stoner, I just really love it. You know, this belief that it's actually possible to write a story about a man's life, you know, to take this project serious and say, you know, it's also a little bit old-fashioned, you know. It's like you want to sit and look at the fire and have a glass of whiskey, and now I want to tell you a story. But yeah, I think I'm not able to do that, but I'm able to read it and enjoy it. But it's not my style. I think I'm more communicating with the reader. Yeah.
It's a different style. Yeah, like you said, it's a different tradition. Jonathan Franzen it's amazing. For those
He's
of you
really
who haven't
amazing.
read him.
Yeah.
But I want to go back to your book, which is why we're here. And so I'm so fascinated by your characters. Like there is Krisa, who the narrator loves her, but she never knows really if she's loved back, or she thinks she is, but not in the way that would really like make her feel warm and fuzzy. And then there is Mona, who is a driver's ed teacher, and who has to, she almost has a nervous breakdown because she can't teach the narrator how to drive, and she's also trying to quit smoking at the same time, doesn't work. And, Parking Peter, who has a very soft side, but he's also like a wolf, so a little unpredictable, but really a nice, you know, Jutlandic guy. Of course, there is like the daycare teacher who has everything under control. Like she can make home-baked rolls and fold laundry and look after the kids at the same time. And the like avant-garde musician Sebastian, and you know, the girl who wants to take, who's in love with the narrator's boyfriend. So many fun characters. So I was wondering if you have a favorite, who it is and why.
Yeah, I really love them all. And I also like them when they are annoying and they're not behaving very well. I like characters who has a project. I mean, I don't have any like boring characters. Sometimes they want something like really weird. Sebastian just wants to create to bake the best bread in the world and create some really weird musician pieces with his kitchen stuff. And I mean, maybe I don't understand why he's doing it, but I just love it when people are passionate. One of my favorite characters is Krisa, and I think it's because she's built around one of my closest friends, who is just really funny to be around. And she's just really funny when she's drunk, and when she like read the book, she was like, "Okay, Stine, I'm not always that drunk," which is because, you know, and I have to like make some scenes where she was not drunk, but because of course she's not always drunk, she's just having this really funny drunk attitude. And speaking about, you know, coincidence, in these years I had a little, you know, baby boy, and I was breastfeeding and just really wanted to go to a party and smoke some cigarettes. So she was just, you know, smoking and drinking all the time while I was, you know, go to bed at 8 o'clock. So I think I used it as a kind of space and time where I could go and have so much fun, and then go back to my own life. And so it was really lovely for me, and both the character and also my friend taught me a lot about being friends. She was this woman I met when I moved to the little village, and in my opinion, a friendship was like talking and talking and talking and talking about everything. And she was just really good at, you know, being together. We don't have to talk all the time, and I was so confused because I remember one night we were like, had a glass of wine, looking at a sunset, and I was like, is this like really awkward, or is it just really cozy? Because I'm not able to relax, you know. And I think actually it was really cozy, but it tells so much about me and what I should learn. You know, just relax. You don't have to talk all the time. It's possible to be close to another person, you know, just by, you know, being, looking at nature.
So that scene in your book, I love it because they're sitting with such close proximity and their experiences are completely different. Like when the narrator gets up and says, okay, I should probably go, and has maybe interpreted the situation as like, when is the other person thinking, when is she going to leave? And then Krisa looks at her and says, it looks all confused, right? It's so, that was really fun, but also like, how do you navigate in a world where you you can't read this like other people's signals?
And it's really also a way to show this that you want to control the situation, because you know, talking can be a way of reaching out. Who are you? Who am I? But it's also a way of trying to control the situation with words. And that's what I was supposed to learn, I guess, by this book. It's, you know, trying to, not, you know, being quiet because I should not talk, but because it's also have a value. It's also a way of relax, to dare not to talk.
And what better place to learn that than in Jutland?
Huh?
What better place to learn that than in Western Jutland?
Yeah, exactly. I find it very inspiring when people are not afraid of silence, because I mean, I try to work with this with this thing, but I can be very afraid of silence. It makes me uncomfortable because I don't know what's happening. But I really want to be better, to just, you know, be. But it's hard for me, so I start talking. Yeah. It's a process. Yeah, but I think that as one student asked me about a question. You know, normally they have so many stupid questions, but he asked me, what did you learn? What was the most important thing you learned from your novel? I think it was a really nice question, and I think about it every time I write. What did you learn from this day? What did you learn from this person? But what did I learn from this book? I think I learned something about silence. Yeah.
And it is the land of short sentences. So that
back to the title.
So I want to ask you about one of the sentences in your book, a very specific sentence, and it says, the more you know what you're looking for, the harder it is to find. And that sentence just kept with me, because I kind of get a feeling, because you've touched on it a little bit throughout this conversation, that you try and live in the now, and every day is like a new experience. But what's the alternative if you don't have that compass in life, that you know what you're looking for? What's the how are you supposed to know what life is about?
Yeah, I'm afraid this will, you know, sound very like New Age, and I want to say again, it's not easy for me. It's just how I want to be. It's not necessary how I am, but my experience is that when I try to be open, and for me, it's a good thing to confuse myself. For example, when I write, I do it very early in the morning because I'm so confused in the morning. So I go up 5 o'clock before my kids awake, and I'm so sleepy, you know, and I just start to write because, you know, I don't even know my own name. I'm so sleepy, but sometimes it can create some sentences because there's not so much control, or I'm free. I'm in the middle of, you know, sleeping and not sleeping for a very long time, actually. But this space is very good for me to be creative. And I think if you take it in these days, we have, at least in Denmark, a lot of dating programs in television. You know, married at first sight, and there's so many different ways people trying to find love, and I find it so interesting, and I also find them like brave, because like we want to meet someone and make an effort for that. But I also think there's something not healthy about it, because, you know, some experts ask you, what do you want, what do you need, what can you give? I mean, it's a little bit like machine or something,
mechanical.
I mean, it's amazing if you succeed. I mean, I only wish for people, you know, love, but I think we can sometimes maybe be so sure of what is right that we don't, you know, see what's just in front of us. That if, you know, my husband should be like tall and dark and intelligent, and he should not like meatballs or something, then you can, you know, have this brain conversation with yourself, and then next to you there's just this amazing person, you know, and you would never see him because he's not look like what you have in your head, and that's too bad, you know.
The algorithm doesn't always work out.
Huh?
The
Yeah,
algorithm doesn't always work out.
yeah, but sometimes it doesn't. That's amazing. But it's just yeah, actually I think it's nice not to know what you want and see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, I met my husband online and I had a ton of questions that I wanted the potential partner to answer. And he just answered back like, I can Google all this, but do you want to know who I really am? And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And,
Yeah.
So maybe life happens and you want to feel like you have control, but do we really? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Your character is like, I love that she's not in control, but at the same time, she gets a lot of good things out of life. She's
Mm.
not confused, but she gets a lot of things out of life.
Yeah. And some like her way of reaching out, and some really doesn't like it, which is also okay. But yeah.
And so when I asked this question, like she finally ends up, like she's in this process of trying to get her driver's license. And she has a gazillion drivers like at classes, and I think it's 80 plus or something, and she ends up getting her driver's license finally. Does she also end up finding out life, you think?
Yeah, for me it was a happy ending actually. The first page, the first scene, she is, walking around at the field feeling so confused, and she don't know where she is, and she's so, like an alien, who came to a new planet. And the last scene in the book, she's going home from a party over the same fields, and it was important for me, like going home, so I think there is this I think it's a story about settling actually, and finding yourself a place where you actually maybe don't want to be, but then finding out that this could be as good as anything else, because it's not where you are, but it's how how you choose to be there actually. Yeah, so yeah, for me it's a story about finding home. And I think the traffic story, or what we should call it, this long episode of trying to have this license, it can also be a kind of metaphor of, to dare be a part of the traffic, to believe the other cars. If you're afraid of driving, it's because you don't believe the other cars. But it's also a way of saying, I risk it, when you sit down in a car, it's also a way of putting your life in the hand of the people you meet. You just hope they are not drunk, and that they are not, boys at 17 who tries to impress each other. You just hope everything will go good, will work out fine. And for me, this feeling was also the same when I gave birth to my son. I mean, I can try to be as good as possible, but I cannot control his life. I can give him love, but it just reminds me about, sitting in a car and just hope everything will turn out fine. And it demands some, you have to find a confidence to other people and other cars, and yeah, and it's difficult. Yeah, but I think it was my process in the book, really to dare to believe in other people, and yeah.
Wow. And
finding home.
on that profound note, I think this is a perfect place, unless you have anything you would like to add. I think this is a great place to end this. Do you have anything you want to say?
No, I think it has been a nice conversation, and you actually made me feel relaxed, so thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. This has been such a huge pleasure. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thank you.
And then before we end, I would like to take a moment to thank the ScanDesign Foundation, Danish American Heritage Society, and Scandinavian Studies Department at University of Washington for their financial contribution in making the National Danish Book Club and Literary Event Series possible, and the Elverhøj Museum for being a promotional partner as well as the National Foundation of Danish America and the National Nordic Museum. Thank you for tuning in, and see you next time. And thank you again, Stine, so very much.
Thank you.